everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, is Tim.
Groovy.
Bit early for that, I think, Tim. It's not really...
Although, there's not as many memorable lines in this one.
Okay, sure. This is a horror movie podcast. We get together, we talk about horror movies, and it is the October-thon, and we are doing lots of extra episodes throughout October, and as with all past October-thons, we are going to be working through a shorter franchise, usually about 4 movies, sometimes 3, depending, over the course of the month. And as the title would suggest, we are doing the Evil Dead franchise. We'll be doing the original 3 films and the 2013 reboot over the course of the month. Starting here with the first one, of course, Sam Raimi's original Evil Dead, starring Bruce Campbell, and we'll be going through them. So we'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do, and we'll give you some warning before we do go into the more spoilery stuff. But it's a classic. It's one of the original video nasties, and if you don't know what a video nasty is, then just look it up on Wikipedia, because I've explained that a few times. The story, the time-old tale of a group of college students who go out to a cabin in the woods and unleash something demonic from the basement. There you go. It's Evil Dead. Deadites happen. There's danger and stuff. How do you feel about Evil Dead, Tim?
I mean, if people know me, then they probably already know my feelings. But no, I absolutely love it. Like, this is, these movies like hold a very special place in my heart. They're very near and dear to me. Is like, and obviously we'll have plenty of gushing on for the other movies, and I do feel like that sometimes this first one gets like a little overshadowed because like the second one has a lot of very memorable like lines, and it's like kind of funny and has like different stuff going for it, and same thing with like the third one maybe is like a little more different or stands out or whatever. But I mean, this first one though is like very solid, just like a really good first attempt at a horror movie. It's doing stuff that maybe I don't know when like the whole cabin in the woods thing started to become a trope, but I'm sure it's probably like maybe like a little more fresh at this time. I can't think of many other ones before this that might have done it.
I'm fairly certain that the cabin in the woods thing became a trope because of Evil Dead. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like this is what kind of caused it. No, you're right. It does get overshadowed by the other ones, and one of the reasons why it gets overshadowed is because Ash is such a memorable character. But Ash doesn't really become Ash until, I mean, he kind of becomes partially Ash in the second one, but it's really the third one, like the Ash that we all think of and joke about, and the one that became the TV show character, much later. That Ash isn't in the first movie, and even the second movie, he's only kind of part way there.
I feel like he's Ashley in this, and then like like he becomes Ash in the second and third one.
Like Ash becomes this wisecracking, cheesy action hero almost, and that's not here in the first movie at all. This is played way more straight.
I would say if anything, he's almost more like a final girl in this than he is like like the other male lead, Scott. His character is actually more of the like badass, if anything, in this. Like he's the one that's like actually fighting back and like kind of takes like some weapons and stuff like early on.
Yeah, to begin with, I think that's part of the point, is that what little arc might be there for Ash in this is that he does start to defend himself and stops being as scared as the movie goes on. But because it's not even just that the later ones are maybe remembered more fondly or have more of a fever about them that people talk about. I think one of the other big things that makes this franchise kind of weird is that 2 is more of a slapstick horror comedy, and then the third one, and we're still going to review it, but the third one arguably isn't even a horror movie. The third one's this adventure comedy about this guy who goes back in time, and like, I mean, Deadites are still technically there, but it's not really a horror movie anymore. This first one is actually a horror film. It through and through. I mean, when I was watching it again the other night, there is definitely some hints of what would come later, but They're not hints in the sense that you can feel the tone coming. They're just hints in that, oh, there's a scene in this where he kind of gets covered in blood. Okay, that's definitely something that goes more wacky in the second one.
Yeah, towards the end, it starts to get more towards the kind of like zaniness, madness that you would see that's like kind of all throughout the second movie.
But it's played very differently though, because in this first one, it's played much more. This is kind of terrifying. This stuff is happening.
Yeah, it is more. It's like a madness, but not really one you're supposed to laugh at. Like I feel like in the, like a big thing of with the second one and is like there's this kind of like this vibe of like going crazy, but it is again in more of a fun kind of comedic way. Where this, it's like you're kind of like following this like spiral of like madness that the character's going down. And so I definitely agree with you. Yeah, this is like definitely like more straight up just trying to be a horror movie. And what I will say about that too is I think it's like very effective at that. Like I think there is like some legitimately creepy like scenes in here.
Actually, that was one of the things I said when I was watching this the other night, is that I actually think out of the original three, I mean, keep leaving the reboot kind of separate because it's very different thing. Is out of the original three, this is actually the only one that I think is creepy. Like, I mean, I love all three of them for different reasons, but I was watching this again. In fact, interestingly, this is the first time I ever watched it in 4:3. You're probably saying at home, like, why did you do that crazy thing? Well, Evil Dead's kind of a weird case because it's practically a student film, right? It was made when they were all quite young. They were shooting on weekends. It's this very low budget thing, as a lot of the big horror movies of the 70s and 80s often are. But this movie was shot in, I think, either Super 8 or 16mm film, and it was shot in 4:3. And because movie theaters didn't really show anything in 4:3, it was always cropped to the 185 to 1. And when we got to the DVD, and obviously for VHS that actually worked out great, because VHS everything was a 4:3, and for most movies that was a terrible thing because it was cropping the shit out of it. For Evil Dead, that was actually the ratio that it was kind of originally shot in. The DVDs and the Blu-rays and stuff, like they give you the option of both most of the time. At least the better editions do. They give you here's the cinema ratio and here's the original 4:3. And for whatever reason, just because I guess it filled the TV, I always picked the 16:9 option, because it wasn't like this bastardization. It was something that Raimi had a hand in, and it was always an option that was intended to be used. But for whatever reason, I thought, I'll for the sake of actually experiencing it this way, I watched it in 4:3 this time, and I have to say I do think the cinematography benefits from watching it in the 4:3, and I was finding myself being impressed by a lot of the shots, and I think that this is visually the best looking of the three movies.
Interesting.
I think the actual just raw cinematography, there's so many good shots in this movie. When they first open the cabin and there's like this smoke inside and it's just a silhouette of Scott at the door, Bruce Campbell going around the basement with the lantern. There's so many just creepy, really almost artistic shots, to the point where it's kind of insane that the two that came after, well, relatively low budget still, from Hollywood standards, are much higher budgets than this first one. I think this first one actually is the best looking movie. I to the point where I'm watching it and I'm going, this movie is overshadowed in a way that I don't think is deserving, because I actually think there's elements of it that are better than the other two, especially as a horror movie. We remember the other two because it created Ash, because it created Boomstick and Groovy and all these other things that people like, but it's almost like this is not a completely accurate comparison or a fair one even, but it's almost like a Terminator 1, Terminator 2 thing, where everyone talks about Terminator 2, but I'm someone who, as I've watched them over and over through my life, and as an adult, I'm like, I think Terminator 1's the better movie. Now that, I'm at that point in my life, and I'm not going to say that about Evil Dead 1 necessarily, but I do think there's elements of it in the filmmaking where I think it might be a better made movie, all in, as a horror film at least.
As a horror film, like, for sure. I would definitely agree with that. Like, I mean, again, I think there's like, I do think it would be interesting if we lived in a world where there were never any sequels, or if there were sequels, but let's say they were like maybe like a little more tame and weren't trying to go for like over the top like slapstick comedy and stuff. Like, I do wonder if this one would be maybe a little bit more remembered as being like a horror classic or something like that people would put up there with like, I don't know, like Halloween or, you know, the first Nightmare on Elm Street or something like that. Because yeah, I do think that, and I totally get it. Like, you know, the sequels, you have this very like, you know, charming, lovable, over the top character with like really crazy elements like chainsaw hands and like just endless amounts of blood and gore and like, I understand it is maybe why people would glom onto that, because it is a lot more memorable and it's like, you know, fun to talk about and recite the lines, and it kind of gives it this longevity that, you know, longevity that the that yeah, maybe this first one doesn't get as much, but yeah, it is one of those ones where like anytime I do sit down to watch this, I am always reminded like, god damn, this is like a really really good horror movie.
Hey, maybe when I rewatch, because obviously we're going to do the whole franchise. Maybe when I rewatch 2 and 3, maybe I'll come out with some hot takes at the end about which one I think are better. But watching this, because it is eerie, there's so many eerie shots that I think are really well framed, and they feel like they're just kind of this raw creepiness to them. And the Deadites actually feel a lot creepier in this than they do in the later films, where they're there for, you know, slapstick horror, you know, shenanigans in later films. Yeah. Whereas this is you know, they're actually going to be creepy. They're very visceral. They're very all these things. And one of the things that surprised me as I was watching it as well is how well the vast majority of the effects hold up. I'm talking the makeup effects and the gore. There is some weird stop motion like clay stuff towards the end, which doesn't hold up. It never did. It's always looked kind of odd. Bizarrely though, it's kind of the thing where I always remember it looking really bad, and it's not as bad as I in my memory it was, but it's still bad. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I kind of still like it though, just because like
it's got a charm. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Much more like I think you'd probably like agree to like much more charming than like bad CGI or something.
So. And then the other thing that surprised me is just how quickly the creepy stuff starts. See, the scene with Cheryl, the sister, like drawing like uncontrollably in front of the clock. That happens like 5 minutes into the movie. It's like really quick. Like and then it gets going. We get a bit of time with the characters. You know, they discover the book in the basement. The basement, which by the way is like way bigger than the cabin itself. Like this basement seems to go on forever. And there's all those little character beats early on with like. The first Linda, you know, Bruce's first Linda, of course. And, you know, him pretending to be asleep when he's trying to give her this pendant and whatever. But it's all about the creepy stuff. It's about the Deadites. It's about not really, you know, thinking that his sister can be saved when she becomes a Deadite, and that's even glossing over the big thing that happens to her before that, which I'll save for spoilers, but there's a very memorable, like, visceral, grotesque scene that happens. It's very insane and otherworldly in what it's doing, but it's also extremely dark. So it's very well remembered for that reason. But yeah, and I think the movie works really well. It's very simple. It doesn't try to go over the top with its like concepts or ideas. It sets up a simple thing and has the characters kind of fall prey to this Deadite thing kind of one by one until we're left with their final person. And you know, so yeah, and the music surprised me as well a little bit actually watching it again. It's not often, but there's a couple of moments in the movie where there's a little bit of synth that plays, and I was like, I don't remember this synth at all.
Yeah, no, I got to see the guy that composed the music. Is it like Joe Loduca or something like that?
Oh, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, the only reason why I know is because they put out a vinyl for it, and I actually went to see him. He played like a couple of like the tracks live, and yeah, the vinyl is actually like a I forget what they call it, but it's kind of like a recompose. Like some of it is like old music, and some of it's like new music that you kind of like redid or whatever, like after the fact. But I do think it's not like other movies where maybe it's super memorable stuff that you can kind of like, you know, hum right off the top of your head. But when you do sit down and watch it, like a lot of times like stuff will kick in and you're like, oh yeah, like no, this is like a good track or like a good score here.
Yeah. I mean, if you really critique the movie, I mean, the characters aren't obviously that deep in terms of like who they are. There's very simplistic stuff in terms of like, but it doesn't really get in the way of it though, because it's not really what the movie's here to do. But yeah, it's one of those things. I've actually got it playing off to the side. If you see me looking over, that's because I've got it playing kind of on the TV over there.
And like I kind of like that like there's like I feel like a naturalness to like the dialogue where like like I don't know, like I think these are all just kind of like, you know, like drama theater, you know, kids that all kind of hung out and stuff, and I feel like you can kind of tell, like, not to the point where it feels like the dialogue is like improv-y, but like to the point where, I don't know, it does feel kind of natural when it's not like, you know, over the top, like being like, what are you talking about, babe? That's totally not what happened. You know, like it is like it does, like, you know, when like Ash is like concerned for his sister, but also like, you know, thinks she's like, you know, imagining things. Like, I don't know, there is like kind of a realness to the performance where it is kind of like, you know, like, oh, okay, like whatever you say, you know, like, all right, let's get out of here. Like, I don't know, like it's interesting. I think but yeah, it all works very well.
Yeah. It's interesting how much of a slow build there is to things early on. I mean, as much as I said creepy stuff starts happening quite quickly, the actual like, build to the first Deadite is, you know, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the build up to it. I just passed the moment in the movie there where the camera's kind of outside the cabin and it's kind of looking into the windows to the various characters, and it feels very, you know, it feels like there's a serial killer outside looking in, but it's not, because one of the big things we talk about in this that continues throughout the series is the use of this kind of like a POV shot of like a malevolent force that's outside. Basically, I think the implication is this is what kind of like takes over people and makes them Deadites, is this force that's kind of traveling through the forest, and like we see it kind of like around, and it's you know, it's kind of interesting that Sam Raimi's idea here was to have a POV shot of something that wasn't there. It's a POV shot of just the evil as opposed to, like, you know, a literal killer. It does give it a unique feel and a vibe. It's a very distinct thing to the series. This especially when they start speeding it up and you get this super quick, because even the movie starts with like as the credits are playing out, you get the over the lake, over the water, not up, you know, up to the bridge, and then eventually they get to the car and stuff. But it's a very distinct visual style.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there's some like really nice shots too. Like there's one where it's kind of like going around from like one window of the cabin to the other, and you kind of like see like characters from like different positions as it goes to the next window. It's really cool. Yeah,
that's what I was just talking about when it's outside the cabin, because it ends with Cheryl hearing like you know, like a voice, and I was questioning as I was watching it because she just goes outside in her bathrobe without telling anyone else that she heard a voice.
That's saying, a little weird.
And she's like, "Hey, hello, is anyone there?" I'm like, really? You think there's someone outside, out in the middle of nowhere, and you get out without even telling your brother, "Hey, by the way, I thought I heard a voice. I'm going to check it out." To which he should probably say, "Hey, how about I go with you?" So, because it sounds like, hey, if there is something out there. So I mean, I suppose we should give spoiler warning so we can start talking about all the stuff that it gets into. I will take this time to thank the Patreon producers for the month. We're recording this in September though, so this is the list as it stands. So thank you to Alison M. Fordyce, Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Sharp, Bordenau, Al Tribesman, Christopher Moy, and Brett Williams. They are our Patreon producers for the month. That means that they are $20 or above on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, but you can support us over there for as little as $1 per month, and that $1 will get you access to a bonus episode every single month. In fact, you'll get 4 bonus episodes during the Octoberthon, so you get a lot of stuff this month. But there's a whole back catalogue now. There'll be, you know, over 20 movies easily by the time this goes out, and you have access to all those for that $1. The $5 tier, you get to vote on an episode once per month, and you get early access to all the review episodes by a day. And then there's even a super vote in the $10 tier. So go and have a look and see if you're interested in all that stuff, and you can you know, help keep all the content coming and get some bonus goodies for your troubles. Plus there's bonus stuff for the other shows that we do as well on MailFuzz TV. So thank you kindly. So full spoilers then for The Evil Dead, because people forget that it's The Evil Dead. It's not just Evil Dead, the first one. But right now on the screen, because I said the movie's playing over on the other monitor. Right now, it's that scene. It is the tree sexual assault scene. You heard that right. If you've never heard of Evil Dead and you're just listening to this, I wonder what this movie's about. Yes, Cheryl, the character, is assaulted by a tree, and it is the most weird thing ever. But it does feel very violent and visceral and otherworldly, and I don't even know what else to call it. It's definitely a very unique moment in a horror movie. I'll tell you that much.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like there's something about it where it's like obviously it's not like you like to see it or anything, but like there is like, I don't know, like other like assault scenes in movies, like it feels so like kind of gross and grimy, but there's something about like having it in this instance be this like other natural force, like it, and not like a humanoid one in any way. It's like just like nature itself.
Well, I think what makes it work really well is there's this sort of the thought process as you're watching it, because you don't know that's what it's going to do. You just see the tree vines sort of start to come alive and then grab the hands, but then it starts ripping off like her clothes and like caressing parts of her, and then you see the one branch go straight in, not the legs, right? And there's a disbelief to what's happening where you're kind of like, what is going on? And there's maybe a joke here to be made about a dark prequel to Guardians of the Galaxy. This was Groot in a previous
oh gosh,
okay. I don't know, it's the only tree character I can think of. Go on, name me another tree that's a character. I dare you.
Well, in Lord of the Rings there's like those Ents, Treebeard.
Okay, name me a tree character and something that's not trash. So but there's this disbelief to it, and it's kind of like this thing where she runs back to the cabin and her clothes are all ripped, and you almost think that like they should all be taking this very seriously, that she looks like she's been assaulted. The movie never quite goes into that territory though, where it kind of like addresses the idea that she's been assaulted in that way. The characters never seem to kind of like understand that anything like that's happening. I'm not even sure she understands. In fact, the actress, I believe, for a long time claimed that she never got that that's what was happening on set. This idea that she never realized that she was being filmed in a scene where a tree was raping her. But I don't know how you interpret the one tree branch going up the legs. Like, how do you interpret that specifically? I'm not sure, but so I'm not so sure exactly the context of that claim. But maybe it was a body double in that one shot. I don't know. That's possible, but I'm not sure if the director and that were trying to, I don't know, pull a fast one or misdirect her as to what was going on.
Yeah.
Again, this is vague memory. If that never happened, ignore everything I just said. But I vaguely remember that being a thing.
But bottom line, it is like, one of the most memorable parts of the movie, and
sure.
It is very visceral and gross, but again, like, strangely like effective because of like how, I guess, bizarre and brutal it is.
Yeah, and of course Ash, like she says, Ash, I need out of here right now, I can't stay here. So he's like, okay, I'll drive you back to town, you can stay there. But they can't get to the bridge. The bridge is like I always confuse this because the second movie you actually get a visual in the remake flashback section, which we'll talk about in the second movie, is what I mean by that. But you get this visual in the second movie where the bridge is like sort of like curled up as if like some force is like, that's not in this though. This is a bit more vague and creepy and kind of,
you still see part of it is like torn up and stuff, and then but like a lot of it is just kind of like their reactions of looking through it. And like I really like the kind of the staging and the set dressing like on these areas of the movies, because it is like so dark. It's like pitch black, but it almost feels like almost kind of like an old school Universal movie or something, because there's like so much like fog pouring in.
In fact, just as you say that, I'm looking at the shot when they're going to the car, and Scott and the other two are standing at the door frame as Ash and Cheryl walk into the car, and there's so much smoke and fog in the shot, and it's almost like it almost looks like a music video where there's light coming from them at the door. You see these shafts of light coming like through them and like around them. It looks really good. There's like the visuals in this are really nice. It's a really nice for a movie that's so grimy and low budget, and like there's clearly talent here, which is bizarre because I think Sam Raimi, everything he's directed that's not an Evil Dead movie has been bad.
That's certainly your opinion, but you know, I'm a big I love Sam Raimi. I'm a big defender of his. You know, I really like a lot of his stuff, and I think the one thing you got to give him credit for is even if you don't like, you know, a lot of his stuff, I think, you know, you gotta admit that he does at least have like a style, like and I think like especially evident like in this movie, it's like, you know, this first low budget movie, he's coming out and he's doing like a lot of stuff that I feel like you just wouldn't see, you know, in other movies.
Joe, I do think he benefits though from having no money. I think the restrictions
Sure.
and not being able to just do anything actually make him a better filmmaker. I think the more money Sam Raimi's gotten, the less I've liked his movies. So there's definitely something to be said where, oh, he can't just have like all these things and do all these wacky things that kind of holds him back a little bit, which I think, for at least for my taste, I think works out better.
I think like with I think maybe like a lot of like, you know, directors from this time period too maybe don't adjust to like CGI as well, or maybe they have so much stuff that they've never been able to do that once you add like computers and stuff and like, oh, I can do like all this and this and this and that, like maybe it loses like a little something from the practical stuff that they're used to doing.
Now, for the record, I don't remember Darkman well enough to say if I like that or not, but at least from recent time, I can say that I don't like his Spider-Man movies. I don't like The Gift, which I rewatched last year. It was actually kind of laughably bad. Drag Me to Hell, I didn't like that much. Oz the Great and the Powerful, I just thought was straight up garbage. So, I mean, there's a trend here of just not liking Sam Raimi movies outside of these 3 Evil Dead films.
Yeah. I've never seen Oz. Like, I should probably watch it just out of curiosity, but I really have no desire. it's
bizarrely a beat for beat remake of the 3rd Evil Dead movie. It's so weird. It's the plot of Army of Darkness, just in a different context. It's really odd.
So strange. I still like the Spider-Man movies. I defend them. I rewatched them recently. I think they're still pretty good. And then and I love Drag Me to Hell. I'm a big defender of that one too.
Well, you know, no one's perfect.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing.
Oh, I'm glad we agree.
Yeah.
I'm glad we agree that no one's perfect. So, I mean, obviously, once we get to the Deadite stuff, though, it's one of those things where I'd forgotten some of the specifics when I was watching this the other day, and it was kind of that thing where I remembered just before it happened the pencil stab in the ankle.
Oh, that always gets me.
And it looks good as well. It doesn't look like obviously fake. If anything, the only stuff makeup wise that I think looks a bit rough is that sometimes the Deadite makeup in the face, it sometimes looks a bit separate, so it looks more like Leatherface than it does like a Deadite.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But no, the ankle stab with the pencil is brutal.
The part that gets me is you have like the initial stabbing, which is pretty bad, but then when they go back to it and they're kind of like, you know, like wiggling it around in the wound and like kind of like going up and down with the pencil, like that's what always gets me. Like, oh, it is very visceral. Yeah,
that stuff's really good. You know, you have Cheryl obviously turns into a Deadite first, and she's like, you know, saying all the you know, your souls are ours to take, or whatever the line is. And she gets trapped in the cell because people, you know, I think one of the big visuals people remember from this movie more than anything else, perhaps, is other than the POV stuff going through the woods, is the idea of the head popping up from the cellar door. And like, you know, the not quite trash talking, that's maybe not the right phrase, but is like, you know, come down here, Ash, or, you know, things like that, or even Scott like actually sitting on top of it and it's sort of
just moving,
rocking around, and you know, all that stuff.
I think really good. I think actually like one of my favorites, and one thing in the movie that I think is like really generally creepy is when I think it's Linda gets infected, how she kind of just like sits there. Like there's something that's eerie about the fact that like she's not like jumping up and attacking and doing all this stuff. Like she's like is sitting there and kind of like, you know, talking in this like kind of like like high pitched like almost sing-songy like kind of way,
and
like,
she also has this kind of like laugh as well, this kind of that she's constantly doing. I think it's notable that like it's all played for creepiness in this movie. That's one of the things we're talking about, where in the next movie, the third one and so on, is that the Deadites are played very much for like slapstick comedy and laughs, whereas that moment where she's sitting in the corner and you realize she's turned, it's actually genuinely tense and it's creepy, and Oh, that's the pencil. But no, it does work really well, and it has a completely different flavor from what the rest of the films have.
Yeah. And then and I like the way it looks too once I think when Cheryl, I think it is, that like first gets infected, and that you notice her and she kind of like kind of floats up and like is dangling like this like puppet body. Like again, it's just like a really cool like visual look, and simple effect, but again, it's like, it's not like other movies, like it doesn't like look like cheap, or like, you can't like see like wires or anything. It's like, I do wonder how they did that.
What's really funny actually is that there's two separate scenes in this movie where Bruce Campbell gets trapped under a bookcase that's fallen over. I didn't remember it happening twice. I just thought that was kind of notable. It's also kind of notable that all the women get deadited first, and it's actually the two men who are left try to defend themselves, which is different to most horror movies. And it's funny because in most walks of life, unfortunately, the opposite is true, where it's always focusing on the men, and the women are kind of the second fiddle. Horror movies are kind of the one place where we expect the final girl, even that phrase, the final girl, like we expect a woman to be the central figure by the end, and it's kind of notable that this is a big exception to that, and even to the point where it's the two men who are left, on their own. Eventually Scott goes down, of course, as well. In fact, one of my favorite moments in the movie is when Ash is like holding off, I think, Linda at the door or whatever, and we see Scott set up in frame in the foreground. He just kind of pops up out of frame as a deadite. That's when he kind of wakes up for the first time after he's died. So that stuff's really, really cool. I also like that deadites can be like dealt with. Like cutting one up does seem to be effective in stopping her. I think because Shelley's kind of the third one who no one really talks about that much, because she's just kind of there as the third one. But because Linda's got all the dialogue, she's trying to like kind of like almost like get Ash to sympathize with her, and try and trick him and all that stuff. And of course Ash has to fight back and tries to bury her in a grave. But they even try and bury Shelley in a grave first, right? They both try and bury her first.
I think so.
Yeah. And I'm like, do you not think anyone's going to ask questions? This is something the TV show kind of exploded actually, but do you not think anyone's going to ask questions when you two come back? Let's say you two survive, and all three of these women are dead, and you've buried them already. Do you not think that looks suspicious, that you've not left the crime scene there to...
Oh, definitely, but I think that's also not the immediate concern.
Oh, absolutely not. No, I get it. But I also say, why is the immediate concern to bury them then, though? Like, it's not like, surely you've got other problems to deal with. But hey, so yeah, there is definitely a portion of the movie though. Once like he's first dealt with Linda and Ash is on his own, where he is kind of on his own for like 15-20 minutes, kind of creeping around the house as like things are turning on. The projector in the basement kind of turns on for a bit. We haven't even mentioned the Book of the Dead really. We mentioned that's how everything starts, but they listen to a recording of this this man who was here with his wife, and his wife became a deadite, sort of talking about it, but they actually let it play, and it says it reads the book, it reads the incantation or whatever it is that awakens the deadites, the evil dead. In fact, one of the things that I forgot about at the end is when the deadites melt because Ash throws the book in the fire. Yeah. Is that you actually see like demon hands coming out of the bodies briefly. I
always forget that part,
Yeah, that because one of the things that I like about the reboot is that it adds a lot of mythology at the end, at least for its own version of it. I'd always forgotten that this first movie actually does kind of have this idea that there are demons behind this. There's demons who are kind of behind the deadites, which makes sense because they're essentially possessed people, essentially. Yeah. But I always forget that little touch.
Yeah, and then like the one thing that's always kind of funny is like he basically just defeats him by like throwing the book in the fire, and it's like just kind of like, oh, is it that easy? Like,
yeah. That would never work in the sequels. Yeah, this is solely a first movie thing. But we get the melting. But there's a lot of, like I say, there's a lot of hints of what it's going to become when Ash is on his own, because you see like the pipe, like blood flowing out of it. At one point, like blood oozes out of the wall sockets, which again is a big thing in the second movie. The idea of blood coming out the walls and all these things. There's a lot of handheld in the camera work as well. A lot of shaky cam, a lot of stuff.
It always I always like that like look to it. Like I feel like it really works well in these movies. Like especially like when things are kind of starting to go like a little crazier, gives it like a nice kind of like, I don't know, like a violent like close up kind of feel to it.
Yeah, because the setup was a shotgun in the basement. Because Scott kind of like points at Ash, and Ash sort of gets the joke and laughs it off, and I'm like, no, if someone points a gun at you, you laugh it off.
Yeah.
Like, stop it. But they set up the gun, Schrodinger's gun, I suppose. Schrodinger's gun? No, Chekhov's gun. That's what I meant to say. Chekhov's gun. That's actually the phrase. I'm mixing my my terms here. But yeah, because they kind of play up Scott as being the confident one, and Ash is kind of like almost shocked at first when stuff starts happening. He doesn't really jump to action, so it's kind of his arc, if he has an arc at all, which there isn't much of in this movie, admittedly. It's that he kind of becomes a bit more proactive and starts to defend himself throughout the film from everyone, and painfully, and almost dying from every angle as all these Deadites are trying to kill him. We mentioned obviously he tries to bury Linda when he's seemingly killed her, Ash that is. Again, it goes very quiet. There's a lot of use of silence in the movie where he's like walking outside and she's in this white robe, and you've got this visual of him holding her in the eerie, again, fog, nighttime, the one sort of lantern lighting things, and he's digging this grave. There's this kind of, and she eventually wakes up and like pleads and all the other things, but even just that serene, creepy quality of like him dragging his bloody girlfriend in this white robe and then carrying her outside, there's just this kind of vibe to the whole thing, and it's kind of like a lot of low budget horror movies. It's more about the situation and the feeling of it than it is about telling some grand story with a big character journey. And maybe the reason why something like Halloween holds up even better than this does is because Halloween has like a bit more subtext in there. There's a little bit more to dig into. Like I say, like as a visual piece of filmmaking, I think Evil Dead holds up really, really well. More so than I remembered it doing before I watched it again. But like I say, there's a lot of Ash on his own, and he's combating the blood. He fights the Deadites. There's a lot of him running from door to door, trying to make sure they're locked and barricaded and all the rest of it, and there's kind of a nice adrenaline surge as he's trying to run through the cabin, trying to make sure he does all this. But ultimately, we get this sort of showdown where he ends up, he's grabbing for the book and he throws it in the fire, and they kind of melt, and the demon hands come out. And again, they had to design these demon hands that come out of the bodies. And the ending, though, is morning. He thinks he survived, but we get the POV camera again, and they kind of saved the most impressive version of this for last, because it's probably the longest time, or the longest uninterrupted POV shot that it has, where it starts all the way back from far back in the woods, and it comes all the way down past the car, through the house, and then ends like going, it's just like sort of, not a jump scare, but like it ends, Bruce Campbell turns around and like sort of screams as it comes up to his face, and that's kind of the ending. And the second movie does deal with this and addresses this cliffhanger in a kind of a weird way, because it kind of remakes the first movie in a prologue, because they didn't have rights to the footage, so they had to kind of like make their own flashback scenes. It was as weird as that sounds, but we'll get into that in the second movie, obviously. It does try to play the emotion and stuff a little bit. There's a lot of moments where Ash is like holding the pendant that he gave, or he's looking at it.
Yeah, like I always got the sense that like there's something to that where, I don't know, maybe it's like supposed to represent like a symbol of like love or good. That, I don't know, it seems like very like, I don't know, something special that he can use, and it does kind of end up saving the day, like, because that's what he uses to like drag the book to him.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. There's a painstakingly long sort of. He keeps trying to hook it with the pendant, and it's not working.
There's a little bit of stretch of like unbelievability. I feel like, where like, come on, like I feel like that necklace wouldn't be able to like hook a book and drag that back, but like it's whatever. You let it go.
Unbelievability.
Whatever.
Disbelievability. I don't know. I don't even know if either of those is a word, but
you know what I'm getting at.
yeah, we'll go with it. We'll go with it. So Evil Dead's very good. Evil Dead is a very short, simple, straight to the point movie with lots of a surprising amount of gore and effects and all the rest of it. And I think like Ash having to like fight Linda the Deadite again, it's played more as a serious thing in this. Even when he's beheaded her and like her blood starts squirting onto his face.
Yeah.
Like, you can easily see how the second movie takes that and turns it into comedy. You can see how it does that,
Totally.
but in this it doesn't. When he's sort of screaming as it's happening, there's no music and you just feel this awkward horror of it. This like he's just going through hell. That's what it feels like. It feels like a night of hell. Whereas the second movie doesn't feel that. The second movie feels like, oh yeah, he's really got a chainsaw. Yeah, let's have limbs flying about and blood squirting everywhere.
There's like like Sam Raimi like said, like, he loves like torturing Bruce Campbell like on these movies, and like and it's kind of like a weird thing where like I feel like as an audience, like we do like to see him get tortured in the second movie, but yeah, like not so much as this. Like it's like when you see stuff that's like you do like these scenes, but you're not like, it's not like you're hooting and hollering like you would be like during the second one.
But it's got very good pacing though, because we talk about all this big stuff that happens with Linda where he beheads her and after the burial, and it's he's hitting her with this big giant like it's like a broken bit of like wood from a house or something like that. He's got this big sort of plank, and he's hitting her over the head with it and all this. But once that's done, he gets back to the cabin, and the Cheryl, the deadite Cheryl, is not in the basement anymore. The door's open, so we have it goes from being really extreme and like very quick and all this aggressive stuff happening to being a slow stalk through the cabin, trying to find where the now missing Cheryl deadite is, and it's very eerie. And then there's even a moment later on when he has to go into the basement again, back when he's on his own, and walking down those stairs when that deadite's been down there has this creepy tension to it. So it juggles, again, and this is probably why I'm saying it's the best horror movie of the bunch, is that it has all the slow tension as well as the all the big erratic stuff where there's all these things happening very quickly. It does have the slow in between where it's like, where are they? Like, where is the deadite?
And I like that stuff too, where he's like traveling in the basement. Again, it's like so dark. I really like just the use of these like very stark like blackness that surrounds him, but like it's never like hard to like see or anything. But yeah, like I really like a lot of those like lighting choices and just how like really dark and black it can get in some of those scenes.
So that's basically Evil Dead in a nutshell. So I guess I'm going to ask you what you're going to rate the film, Tim.
It's one that I feel like, I mean, I've seen this like a billion times at this point, but like it does still continue to grow on me. I feel like each time I see it, and I do think part of it is like, again, that like the fact that it doesn't have maybe as much notoriety as like the sequels that if you do go to watch it and it's been a while, maybe you forget about how good it is, but it is like really damn good, and I'm constantly like surprised and happy when I watch it. Yeah, I mean, it's really solid entry into like probably like my favorite like film franchises of all time. So I'm gonna go with a 9. I think it's great. It's one that like I just love watching, and man, what a great start to a great series.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this because I was kind of impressed again watching it and being surprised with like just it holding up better than I remembered it. And not I didn't have a negative opinion of it, not even close, but
right, yeah,
just being surprised at how good it actually is again, watching it again. And I don't think I'm going to quite go as high as that. I'm going to go 8.5, but it's very, very, very good. And like I say, the pacing's kind of something that impressed me a lot this time. Is the way it can slow back down again, and it has these quiet, just pure dead silent moments. And I mean, maybe there is more silent moments in 2 and 3 that I'm forgetting, but I don't remember them having the silent eerie stuff. I don't remember that being there, and I think it's actually really good in this movie. So
totally.
Yeah, Evil Dead for me. The Evil Dead, the original, is a 8.5 for me. So yeah, very, very good stuff. Definitely a classic, definitely worth seeing if you're checking out the must sees of the horror genre. I think Evil Dead's one that has to be up there.
Totally.
And you should see it before 2. Yeah, you should see the first one first. So there you go. Evil Dead, which starts our trip through the franchise. 2 obviously next, and we'll be getting through them. So if you have made it this far in the review, this far on YouTube specifically, then put the words. I'm not picking groovy. We need to save groovy. We need to save that.
Necronomicon.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Put the word Necronomicon in the comments. Okay, I'll get Tim to do the pose for the thumbnail. So Tim, if you could prepare yourself, we can 3, 2, 1 and press play. No, say pose. 3, 2, 1, pose. Yeah, make sure your eyes are over the top. There you go. That's it. Very good. So that that's Tim's pose. That about wraps things up. I will say, please do like on YouTube. Liking is super important. It's a free way to support us, and let us know you enjoy the content, and let us know what sort of movies you like us covering. But also lets YouTube find us more of an audience. You can also, of course, support us on Patreon, as we mentioned earlier, for financial support for as little as $1 per month. Patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. So please do go and have a look at that. I hope you're enjoying the Octoberthon. Get us on Twitter at Screams Midnight as well. But there are more episodes coming all month, as well as the rest of this franchise, and you can look forward to all those, including extra bonus episodes on Patreon and a whole sorts of other things. We're doing, we're finishing off a few franchises that we've been working on for a couple of years as well, getting them, written off the books, and everything's coming up horror. In a year that's very horrific for lots of real world reasons, we can still enjoy our chosen genre of escapist entertainment. Well, okay, there you go. That has been Evil Dead. This has been Screams After Midnight. Thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, guys, and we will see you next time.